Thanks for joining us. My name is Rob Newton. I'm the marketing manager here at Visual Impact, and today I'm delighted that we're joined by Brett Danton, who's a director DP and has been working with some of the most iconic brands across the world for more than 20 years. So welcome, Brett.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Very, very good. I was going to say I've got no excuse for sounding a bit jet lagged, but Brett has, because he's just come back from
Yeah.
another shoot. So yeah, if one of us nods off, don't worry.
Yes, just prod me.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. As I say, Brett will be giving us a remarkable insight today on the new Jaguar F-Pace commercial, which he shot in New Zealand on the Canon C200.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and
about 3 months ago.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing about how the camera performed, because obviously there was some difficult conditions. And
Yes, we had everything thrown at us.
That's right.
Yeah, everything we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it'll be interesting to see just how the camera stood up with that, both shooting wise and also in post, of course. Which
Yes.
is important.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Okay. All right. So this is the first time I've done one of these, but I'm finding it really exciting.
It's good, isn't it?
It's a great way to do it. So also, this is assuming, I hope everybody's watched the commercial, but that's what we're assuming you have. So there's a little bit of a breakdown on what we went through in terms of using the camera, all of that kind of stuff. So it's, talking about our experiences and what we thought of it in the post, and and what it went through. So I'll just here we go. Just going to flick back on the right side. So I'll just flick through. So I mean, I did a little introduction on who I am, director and DOP. We've won many awards, not just myself, but the people who've worked on the jobs, particularly DPs who've worked with me. When I direct, I do use a DP quite often. I've only got 3 or 4 that I really like working with, because I come from a DP background, so I guess I'm quite demanding in what I expect.
Yeah.
And if what I found is when you're directing, to do the 2 jobs is incredibly hard. They both require equal amount of concentration. Smaller jobs maybe, but yes. So I was a still photographer for 20 years shooting film. So I worked internationally on a lot of brands, shot 5.4 film, which always makes me laugh now when everybody's talking about latitude with cameras. I mean, we used to have plus or minus a third of a stop. So if you want to learn exposure, go and shoot some transparency. And I'm finding it quite interesting with the onslaught of HDR. People have got to learn exposures again now, because there seems to be a bit of a trend, I think, over the last couple of years with cameras that can sit there and do 15 stops of latitude that, you sort of wave your finger in the air and go, well, I can grab that out, because you can grab your 5 stops out for your Rec 709. So now we're sitting back inside an HDR and we've got to pull 12 stops out of something. We've got to get it right. So hopefully, I think that brings back a bit more of an art form for me and a bit more crafting, So anyway, big thing, image is everything for me. Even as a director, I'm very, I'll fight with anybody to make sure the image is ahead of anything. So I guess I call myself a visual director more than anything. So the first camera I ever shot with, what sort of made me move across the Canon, was the 1DC, and I did the launch with that. That I still think is a great camera. The images off it were fantastic. Yes, you couldn't push and pull it in terms of grading, but in terms of that actual full frame image, it was fantastic. We did 1 shoot with it, and the first one won a silver awards for cinematography. So you can't really say any fairer than that.
No.
And then the next one we did was the C300 Mark II release film, which I think a lot of people might have seen. That was a little bit of a fun. We decided, Canon said, we want to shoot with this, we want to show certain things, autofocus, this, that, and everything else. You can't show autofocus. That's never going to work. And actually, in the end of the day, 80% of the commercial was probably using autofocus. Right. It was just shot with myself and my DP, so it was literally the 2 of us. Then we were the crew, and we decided to go to a terrible place, Mykonos in Greece, and have a bit of fun. But he arrived the morning of the shoot with the camera literally in a brown paper bag, got off the plane, and we were shooting that afternoon, and we had no idea what it could do. We had no idea on the specs. We put it on some things like on gimbals, and it worked, and it did what it did, and that also won a silver for cinematography. And I think that was the first time I'd ever seen a 15-stop dynamic range, and I remember everybody saying no, it didn't, but this is the iconic image from that. And if you look at this, we had no lighting and everything was handheld. and we were shooting into the sun, and her skin tone and her eyes, you could see everything, and it was just you know, it was fantastic. So that was the first time, and I remember literally we were looking at back, just playing it back on the laptop, going wow. And I remember, even though at this period people were saying, you know, cameras can't do this, can't do that, and they're judging images, most people hadn't even seen stuff back in 4K, because trying to watch 4K back then was a nightmare. So that used to annoy me. So, you know, fortunately now we seem to have moved on from that. We can actually now view stuff properly in 4K. I edit and grade, and I can watch back in 4K on my laptop, so I'm happy with that. And then the start of this year did the C700 release film, that was a lot of fun. Right. Same kind of thing. We got a C700, turns up in a brown paper bag, day before Christmas, and we decided to use it on a Range Rover commercial in Australia, and mounted in the front of a helicopter on a shot over mount with a 30-300 Canon cinema zoom. So again, throwing it at the deep end. We didn't know what the camera could do. We went to a remote location, same kind of thing, you know, and thought we'd just put it out there and see what this thing could do. We were in dust. We had to shoot very fast. We went from, I think in the morning it was sort of 3 degrees. It was 43 degrees by lunchtime. So you've gone through everything, you know, and nobody had ever mounted one in the front of a shot over. And the one thing that we never wanted to have was a white car. And what do we get sent? A white car.
Good news.
Yeah, good news. Absolutely. Got a white car, and Jaguar turned around and said it was the first time the white car had ever looked any good. We projected it in 4K and ran some stuff, and it was used as cinema in Australia. And because of that, they were happy for us to allow us to use the C200 on the shoot. So that's why this whole sort of thing kind of happened. So, you know, this was from one of the aerials, but this is in broad sunlight on the 30-300 from the helicopter. You can see here, you know, the amount of details in the shadows. That's what blew my mind with the C300 at that time. It was incredible. That was the white car, which, you know, you can see it was holding all the detail on the side and the front. So, you know, it was fantastic. This was the C300, the C700 being mounted in the front of the helicopter. Right. Fairly large piece of gear, as you can see. I don't know what cost it is, but I think it's about 300 kilos it adds to the front of the helicopter. So there's a lot of hard work on that. And that's what I called our giant drone. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. So because of that, they were very happy for us to, you know, use the C200. And I wanted to do a commercial where we only had a certain amount of time, and that commercial with the 700 was really pretty much driving shots. With this commercial, we had a lot more stuff we knew we wanted to get. We wanted to operate quite quickly and move around fast. It's funny, I'm almost going a little bit anti-drones now because I'm getting a bit sick of them unless they're used in the right way. But this one, we decided to go back to a drone. So I wanted a camera we can fly, and we couldn't fly a 700, obviously. It's just on a drone, it's just too big. And we wanted something we could, as I say, pull off and use as a gimbal and run around and do all of that stuff. So this 200 seemed to be the perfect. So as I say, it's the Jaguar, the World Car Awards, which it won. So commercial requirements were we would need to do a 30 and a 60. So we needed to get enough footage to cover a 60. We had some VFX elements, which I'll run through in a little bit, including green screen and some composite work. So I'm a firm believer if you're going to shoot green screen and comp work, you need to be in a raw environment. You know, if you've ever tried to see anything with compression, you try to use green screen, it's got a jagged edge and it just looks terrible. So, you know, we had extreme weather conditions, which if you've watched the BTS, you know, we had wind, we had the temperature, we had rain, snow and fog, which is the one thing we didn't expect. If you look at the BTS, you'll actually see water dripping down the camera, which I think speaks for itself that it kept going at that. High dynamic range in lighting, you know, and Jaguar want their colours to be correct as well. So, you know, we've got the snow, we've got the rivers, and it's a harsh light. So, you know, if you've been, I'm going to show everybody's been to the Alps or here or skiing, and you know how bright it is. It's really, so again, we want to do that. Remote locations, I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere. So we needed a camera that was going to be reliable. I so far, touch wood, I do need to touch wood on this, I haven't had a Canon breakdown on me on a shoot, so I've been extremely lucky.
Okay.
And yes, I know people looking at going, you've got a lot of people there. We did actually have, I would say, a limited crew and budget. It's not a bottomless well on a commercial shoot. Everything's got a decision behind it. And the crew, really at the end of the day, I think we only had about 24, 25, which is quite low in terms of a commercial shoot, to be honest with you. And we chopped it right back, and we wanted to move fast, and we were limited to the rigging and what we could provide. So my big thing is longevity of images. I hate it. I mean, I've had it now where people have come in with HD stuff or even SD and said, "Oh, can we cut this into your beautiful 4K project?" And you show them on the screen, they go, "Ah." Yeah. Coming from a stills world, I used to shoot raw all the time. Yeah. So I used to shoot, with the Cine large format backs, and I mean the quality is still amazing. So I believe, again, shooting in a raw workflow. The thing that's lovely with this is you decide in post then what way you want to go with your workflow. Yeah. So you shoot your raw, then you decide whether you want log 2 or log 3, which is the bit that makes it really fun and exciting for me. We had multiple locations, so I think we covered something like 300 or 400 miles in a couple of days, and then we actually had to go back and get a couple of pickups on another day, so we all stayed on. We wanted easy data management because you are on location. The C700, I mean, that chews data 2 terabytes, 16 minutes on the C700, and that's at 25 frames. So we weren't doing that. This is nice. Everybody thinks this camera's chewing data. I don't think it chews data. We didn't have any backlogs with it. It shoots. We were 16 minutes on a card at 25 frames. You could download that in 4 minutes. We used a G-Tech RAID, which has a CFast reader in the front of its slot. Pulled it right off really quickly. So we never had any bottlenecks in terms of shooting. We did, just out of interest, try a normal Lassie rugged, I think it was a Firewire 2, Thunderbolt 2. Now that would have come down to 45 minutes to pull off properly. So yes, you do need something relatively fast, but it's not out of the question at all. Small form factor, as I said, for using on the drone. HDR color space. We are trying to get this finished in HDR. It's more causing a couple of issues, more actually, funnily enough, on the post-production side of stuff than anything. Grading and everything, but it's more the special effects. We're having a bit of a few issues on that, but it will be done. But we sat it inside the Dolby Vision, and I've tested it, and we went to Dolby. We did a test grade, and we have screened it and had a look at it, and it looks phenomenal. It's when you see the bits in the snow, you actually get goosebumps.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, wow. Yeah. I finally got an HDR TV at home the other day, and I'm glued to it. Can't stop watching.
Yes. I think it's another step. I think both for consumers who are watching it, but obviously on the professional side, that has made a big difference. You don't have to spend 10 minutes convincing someone why they should be using it. You just show them the pictures.
Oh, absolutely.
And right. Yes.
Yeah. The other, because I was never a lover of 3D.
No.
And I mean, it just
keeps coming back is it 25 years or 50 years?
Yeah, every now and then it comes back. And putting on those goggles, and then you put it on, and the image suddenly went dark, and it was just, yes, certain things looked amazing, but I think HDR, for my mind, is here to stay, and it just looks incredible. So you're right. It's once people have seen it once. The only thing I found interesting, and it's not, we did a thing in Soho a while ago. There was another HDR thing. The only thing that I've come across, that you need to think a little bit more about separating your subject from the background in HDR, because if you're shooting, say, an actor, it holds all the detail. So normally where you might drop something out, or you might use an exposure blowout to hold that person, all of a sudden they can blend into the background. And it's all, we were saying you almost needed an HDR and SDR grade, put them side by side, and then play them back in sync and go, I'll take the SDR here, I'll take the HDR here, and because of the way the image looks. And that's almost the perfect way to do it.
Sure.
Everybody said with this, the best way to do is do a SDR grade first and then do your HDR. Because if you do your HDR first, you lose interest in your SDR grade, because it becomes quite disappointing. So I think that's an interesting thing. In terms of exposing for HDR, the secret, and this comes directly from the guys at Dolby, is just don't let your highlights go. You know, you can sit it down in the shadows, you know, but if you let your highlights go, then you're going to have an issue, and that's going to show in HDR. So we didn't do anything different than exposed to that. So if you look on the waveform, it might be sitting down a little bit, but that's because we're holding the highlights. Obviously, there's going to be a moment where you're going to clip those highlights, but you know, you make that decision. So we thought we'd have we thought we'd be using the 700 a lot more on this. We had 700s there as backups just in case. And particularly on the green screen, we thought we'd be using the 700 files. And actually, the entire commercial is 200 except for one shot. And the only reason that shot's in there is because we like the shot, and we happen to have the two cameras side by side. So in terms of green screen, in terms of everything, the 200 and the 700, I mean, they work perfectly side by side. So, and also as well, we wanted to see a test on, you know, to make sure that it worked well between the two. So I guess sort of, you know, going through, you know, just a little bit of a shoot workflow. There wasn't anything complicated. We did a dual record. I only call the MP4 a proxy. I know there's debate out there on what people think that MP4 should be used for, but there again, I have seen some great playbacks on it. As I say, you know, the 1DC, if that image off that was when that was put out in video and you didn't play with it, it had a beautiful image, you know. So, and I've seen the MP4 and it does look fantastic, but I call it a proxy file. We recorded down to the CFast as the main record in 25 and 50 frames. And then we just recorded, the MP4 goes down to the SD card, and with that we put a Rec 709 on it with a wide dynamic range just so we can monitor it, and it looked nice to play back. In terms of monitoring, we used the EVF on this a lot. I love the Canon EVF, and you know, I do think the days of I look, using a screen on a camera to monitor outside, I just don't know how people do it. I think you need to look through a proper viewfinder and see a proper image. It's almost like you spent all this money on the camera and you can't see what it's shooting. I just don't quite get why people do that. Anyway, we used an HDR LUT on it, and then we had the Atomos, which gave us a great view of the HDR on a monitor as well. And the other thing that's really nice about having that is a separate recorder. If we wanted to, at night, we could review back really quickly without having to go onto the camera and check stuff. And, you know, it's a nice little review tool. So really simple workflow, nothing complicated. We pretty much use the camera out of the box. I don't believe in turning around and playing around with it and pushing and pulling it before you even know what the manufacturer thinks you should be able to do with it. So we did 4096, 2160 with CFast at 25 and 50, as I say. 800 is its base. We didn't really change it from there whatsoever. We had a daylight balance pretty much all the way through. Didn't use any filters on it. We just used the built-in NDs. Again, you know, there are certain filters out there, but you know, the days of having to run grads and soft edge grads, hard edge grads, all of that kind of stuff, with a 15-stop dynamic range, you know, you're not really needed to pull those in anymore. You can almost do that in grading. And I'm a firm believer you don't run things like soft focus. Why spend all that money on that lens and then put on something like that? There was a famous Italian DOP that said soft focus was only for people who couldn't light. But
Cruel, but
yes, yeah. Sorry, you can do your soft focus with your lighting. You don't need to do it with filters. There's a show on at the moment. I'm laughing every time I see it. Actually, I saw it in Australia, and every time they cut to the presenter, she's got soft focus on it, and it's hilarious anyway. And then we use some of the custom programming functions on the EVF, which is really nice. So you can, which is part, you know, why having the Canon EVF is good, because you can set some buttons for waveform off and on, magnification, and a few other bits and pieces. So, and that works across the whole range. So, you know, we had an onset, as I say, an onset RAID with a CFast reader. You know, that worked really well. This time we actually used Frame.io and uploaded the stuff before we left New Zealand. And then they could actually start work on the edit back in Australia. Back in London. That worked really well. You know, it was a nice way of doing it. And we just uploaded the proxy files and reconformed to the RAW afterwards. And that actually all went, surprisingly, didn't have a glitch. And as I say, we use the Atomos for sort of viewing in HDR and set. And we had the Canon monitors there as well, the 17s, which was fantastic for watching a 4K image back. But obviously, when we were flying it and we were using the wireless links with the Teradex, we were only coming out in HD, so you couldn't see a 4K HDR image that way. So going down, just a little breakdown of, and I've broken down each into each section, I guess, of the commercial. Yeah. So the first one's the ballerina dancing on the top of the hill, which was sort of looking into it, was supposed to be. We had this incredible location, and if you watch the BTS, you'll see it all starts off in the fog. Well, that was the one thing we didn't expect to have. And we were up there, and we literally sat up on the top of this hill for 3 hours in fog and rain and mist. And apparently the rest of Queenstown was in bright sunlight. And we're on the radios going, and then the locals kept, no, it's going to move, it's going to move. And it didn't move. And no, it's going to, no, and nothing happened. Anyway, so all of a sudden I said, well, we're going to have to go. We have to go to the next location. We hadn't got the shot, although we'd set up for it, and we shot it in this, well, sorry, we did start shooting, but if you notice, it was in cloud and it just looked terrible. My creative director from the ad agency is looking at me, like, this is not what I wanted. Yeah. I'm going, this isn't what I wanted. Anyway, so as we were leaving, driving off, and everything was packed up, all of a sudden the cloud went poof, and the sun came out. We were supposed to be shooting literally on sunrise, and it was supposed to be this beautiful soft light. By now it's 11 o'clock. We're looking straight into the sun, and it was as harsh as anything. Camera was not rigged, nothing was rigged, and we shot that whole of her dancing in a location we've never seen in about 10 minutes, without any lights, without any fill, with a camera that was completely rigged for something different.
Yeah.
So, it was, and this is one of the things that I find that I'm liking with the way the Canon stuff is working, that if you look here on the side of the 200, you've got the ND buttons, you've got the record, you've got the magnification, and all of those. That is in exactly the same place as the 700 and the 300.
So you can switch between.
You can jump, and I don't think people realise how important that is now, the familiarisation on the camera. So the DP who was shooting, and I'll show some shots in a minute. I mean, you'll notice he's still got the slide plate. We didn't even have time to rig it up properly. He's never handheld a 200 by this stage, and he knew exactly where the buttons were because he's used to shooting with the 700 and the 300, and that makes a massive difference, I think. So again, we would use the EVF because, as I say, you're in bright sunlight. I think if you'd been using something different, you would have missed the shots. But it was shot into the sun. We had no fill, really harsh lights. We needed to hold all the shadow or highlight details for HDR, and we shot with the Cinema Prime. So, these are the so this is the quick little setup. As you can see, he's got the ARRI grips, but you notice he's actually resting the camera on his rails on the shoulder. That's our little time, because it was literally ripped from it was in the case, and bang, off it went. So, that's he's got a wonderful DOP stance there. It's fantastic. We call him the walking tripod. But so you can sort of see there, really quick there, and there is no fill. That she was literally dumped there, and that was shot in 10 minutes, and that was 11 o'clock. Yeah. And I find this quite interesting. So this camera that the stills has taken was a 1D Mark IV, whatever. Yeah. And you'll notice here, even on this, it's struggling to hold the mountains in the background, and these are ungraded. They just came straight off the camera in RAW. Yet the C200 held all the details. So I think that's kind of really interesting to see those two ways of doing it. So that was that. That was the first morning of the shoot. By now we're about 4 hours late, but we got that shot, so we were pretty happy about that. Then the next section in the ad is the stag. Now, there is an interesting story about why this became a VFX shot. Is originally we were going to use a real stag, and we found the people for the stag and all this kind of stuff. And they've got semi-trained stag, but if it's like when I've used a trained kangaroo, you kind of point it in a direction, let go of the tail, and rugby tackle it when it gets to the other side. So I'm imagining like that. So anyway, so we had all of that, and we wanted the stag. Then we get informed that the antlers are all shed at this time of year. I didn't realize this. So there's not a stag, with any antlers anywhere. So we had to come up with another solution. So it got done in VFX.
Right.
But then they adjusted the script to make it work, which I thought was quite an interesting way of doing it. But
Yeah.
this is, well, excuse me, sorry. What I found really interesting, this is what, excuse me, 2 seconds. What I find interesting between log 2 and 3 is we could decide afterwards which one we used.
Yeah.
So when you take the raw files into post, you then go, yes, I want 2, 3, or 709. So to give you an idea, this is a log 2 file, which sees, you can see right down into the shadows here. And bearing in mind that we're looking towards, sunlight, we're looking in towards it, that's looking towards the setting sun. That is, I reckon, 15 stops, and I don't care. It's, if you look at the darkness of the mountains and against a blue sky, you'd normally expect to lose something.
Sure.
So log 2 has been out for a while, and yes, it's harder to grade, but you can make that decision on which way you want to go. Log 3, and this is, you can see the difference here, is not holding as much. The highlights will still sit the same, but the shadows doesn't hold as much. It's not seeing into the shadows. But a lot of the time you wouldn't need to use a log 2 file, because you might not want to see that far. What happens is, you'll notice here with the log 3 is much easier to grade, and it's quicker and a much simpler file to work with.
Right.
Log 2, as I say, a little bit harder work. Then we came on to what we actually graded out of this, and that's the graded file. So what we actually did was we graded using the log 2, because we wanted to see into the shadows and hold the detail. But if you look at that, it's holding the orange in the sunset, and that's into the sun has gone down behind. We're holding the details in the whites and into the shadow areas. I think it's quite phenomenal what it's
fabulous.
holding. And the gradation in the sky, I would expect that blue, even on here, to be putting up a bit of banding, and it's still holding as a beautiful gradated blue, and that's the one thing that always seems to fall apart, is the blues. Gradation there. So that's a good way to explain, and you don't have to make that decision until after you shoot, which is great. You're not locking yourself into something, where you can't, where you're deciding beforehand, and then you go, oh, I wish I'd gone a different way in the post. So that, for me, is what this is really, really about. You've got all of that, just you can decide on that quality afterwards. So with the Stag VFX stuff, we wanted to have a clean image, and you'll see, I believe we had 15 stops of light there. We used the raw file. We did the Stag in 3D, and what we do is we build the Stag in 3D. That gets a rough grade, and then the two get assembled in flame, and then they get regraded together, so it all sort of matches a little bit more, and that seems to be the best way of doing it. We then went down for a log 2 on this, and this is the interesting bit. That was a log 2 file. Now, this is the first time, bearing in mind, in the Telecine suite, I'm sitting there, and yes, we use, expensive pieces of gear to grade, but there is something I can show you later, which I've graded on my laptop, that we shot in a little bit of a downtime, and it looks beautiful, and it was graded, and it doesn't have to be done in these facilities. It's done in these facilities because we have time frame, and we have clients, we have all of that kind of stuff too, and it's real time as well. So I'm looking at this file, and I'm thinking, well, that's nice, but what's that going to look like once it's graded? I mean, you're a bit scared when you're looking at that, and you're thinking, what have I just committed to? And then Mr. Magic Finger starts playing around in his panel, and bang, that was the graded file, and you just sit there. Big difference, and I'm not joking. It didn't take him very long to get to that. I mean, he put we didn't have any of the LUTs at that time when we did this; they hadn't come out. I think all he did was put a slight film curve onto it, and did a couple of bits and pieces, and that was it. There's no voodoo or magic or anything. There's a couple of little power windows here and there, but that's probably it. So, and I turned around and looked at the client, smile when he saw that file, and I was like, pretty happy about that. So that, that was the first time. Then this was another interesting bit, was the stuff of her driving inside the car, which is the next scene on. Whilst we were supposed to be shooting at the top of the hill, and it's thick cloud, we thought, well, we need to shoot something. So we shot all of the scenes of her pressing the buttons inside the car, looking like it's starting. There's a couple of little close-ups. We did all of that. The light there was just fantastic because it was like a giant softbox. But one of the things that got me, and when I come in here, is skin tones, and you'll see this when I come into the fingers. The details in the blacks. Again, we're working inside a car, so something like a 700 would be quite tricky to move or anything else.
Yeah,
they've got a big
physicality.
thing. Yeah. It was also cold and it was wet. So that was the shot I'm talking about. She's got very porcelain skin. And I think the roll off on the skin and the skin tones are beautiful. The detail in the blacks are still holding, and so much so when we came in to grade this shot, we actually dropped quite a bit of detail out. You'll see another one that I've got as a little example further down. But that skin tone looked fantastic. That was the conditions we shot it in. As you can see, that's pretty thick. And to give you an idea on how cold it is, the guy in the back wrapped in the blanket was our grip, and you couldn't fight that blanket off him if you tried. So, but I mean, that's how cold it was. And you can see here, I mean, we had the focus puller, Ashley shooting, got the viewfinder on, and they worked pretty quickly and easily with that. And it was, we didn't run any, I decided, again, we had to shoot quickly, so we went off the camera monitors rather than running any form of, wireless or anything like that. And we found it a really nice way to do it. So again, that worked well. Then we moved on to sort of the mountain range and flying the drone, and that was a really interesting thing. We mounted up quite quickly with the Movi, and we used the cinema primes, but in the wind chill, I mean, it's sort of, once that drone's up and flying, it's -15, -7. I mean, it's cold, and you'd expect the camera to sort of fall apart.
Yeah.
No, it sort of went there. We flew the cinema primes, which I don't think you can really fly a nice piece of glass. Beautiful lenses to fly. We could get to the controls pretty easily once it was all there. And what we did was we actually left one camera completely. We had two C200s, so we left one rigged in the gimbal for the entire time.
Right.
So we could run between gimbal, drone. In the end, we actually went shoulder and drone. I like a bit more phonetic stuff, and I'm getting a bit over smooth shots, so we sort of moved there. The camera's powered off the drone and used hardly any draw. But then one of the really nice things was we could use the autofocus assistant, which when you're flying with drones, trying to know focuses can be a bit tricky, especially when you get cinema primes and it's fairly wide open.
Yeah.
And you could verify that your focus was okay there. The other thing too is we've had in the past, and what gear's like, it works and doesn't work, and we now have a bit of a theory that once we start running, once the drone takes off, so you've got about 7 minutes flight time.
Right.
So we were fine with the cards, because the cards you get 16 minutes record, so we never ran out.
Yeah.
I have had it when the drone's got down, flown, it's locked in place, it's all ready to hover, and for some reason the radio link won't run the camera. So that's our theory now. As soon as it takes off, it's recording, yeah, and then we know we're all fine, and we're not missing shots. So again, this was another little moment of, oh no. So this is a log 2 frame grab, and you can see that, and you're looking at it. Now, I knew how stunning this shot was because I'd seen it. I'd stood there and shot it, So we knew what the light was like at that time, and it was fantastic. So again, I'm sort of getting a little bit nervous, and we started playing around, and that was the grade. And again, it wasn't played around with it, and just the detail. And if you look sort of at the bottom, there's the white snow, and sort of in the bottom edge, 3/4 of the way along to the right, you can actually see footprints down in that snow.
Yeah.
And to hold that detail, and also as well, you can see by the car headlights, we are shooting quite late on into the evening as well. This is literally as the sun's going down. I would have expected, I mean, you can see that you're still holding detail in the blue sky up towards the back, and that's got full sunlight on it. So, that for me is really showing the detail again that this camera can pull out. And you think you're shooting 4K RAW on that? I mean, that's a usable still on the internet. And in fact, actually, I think Jaguar have pulled some of this off and using it on the websites as stills. So it's completely doable. So that was it, rigged up, and you can see it makes a really nice little package. It's not big whatsoever, and flew really well. We didn't really seem to have any dramas, and that was it flying along. So it's a nice, neat little thing. Interesting enough as well, bearing in mind you're in the mountains, so your weight on what the drone can lift is reduced quite a bit because you've got thin air and it's cold, so the performance of the drone's way down. So another thing that you forget about when you're looking at cameras, it's not like flying sort of here, so a lot of stuff, would change. Then, so this was one of the more interesting one. This was the actual driving stuff, and we rigged the camera in the back of the car on some sort of scaffold poles and stuff like that, which allowed us to get the camera back nicely. And they're not very big in the back of these cars, but this, I think, sort of speaks for itself. Ben, the color grader, said normally he'd have to do a 2-pass grade on this. So he would have graded for the inside, graded for the outside, and the two would be stripped together in flame. And I think you'll see here, when I move on to here, if you look at that, you've got full sunlight outside on the mountains. You've got some of the mountains in shade. You've got sunlight hitting her, but then you've got her in shade as well. So you suddenly go, well, actually, yeah, okay, there's a lot of detail to deal with and blacks. But no, he pulled this all out, and you notice we've even decided to drop detail in the blacks. He pulled all of that out in a single grade rather than that, and that, time frame saves quite a bit of money. And the thing that I loved about this is the skin tones and the wrap on her cheek and everything still look beautiful. And that's the stuff I'm always looking for as well, to make sure, that's always working really well. And to be able to do that as a single grade, I mean, normally I would have expected all of that top bit of the mountain in the snow to have just completely gone. So, saved our day. So then we came on to the car driving, which is the last little bit where it was sort of driving down towards the bottom of the lake. Again, dynamics range. It was 50 frames. We shot it all out. By this time we've got rain coming in. We're supposed to be in beautiful sunlight, and we picked it for that very reason. It's getting really cold. We've got a car that's traveling quite fast, so we use the focus guide to help us. Another thing I didn't say too is that again with this we asked for anything other than a grey car. We've got a grey car, dark grey car, so we've got a whole lot of that. And so just okay, sorry, I've made a slight mistake there. Okay, going back to it. So look, let me just go through here. This is what I was trying to get to. So this is the first shot here, and this is the very grey car that we're looking at. We're talking about, and we're trying to hold the detail on all of this driving. And this is the morning of the fog. We decided to shoot all of this. And you can see it's holding all the roll off on the top. And then when we came into grade, that's what was pulled out. And that's when Jaguar said, love what's happened there. You can actually see all the detail in the radiator at the front. Everything's there. So, that was one. And again, this is in rain and cloud. Then from there, we moved up to the riverbed, which is the bit I get into. Now, this is where I started to freak out a little bit. You'll see this. This was supposed to be shot literally as the sun's gone down. Now, because we were running so late from shooting at the top of the mountain, by the time we got here, you can see by how much those car lights are on that it's pretty into the evening. That is probably the flattest light I've ever seen. And this was supposed to be this glorious moments of when the car's looking stunning, and I'm thinking, oh no, we're going to be back here shooting again. This isn't going to work. And I'm fairly stressed getting into the grade, and bang, that's what he pulled out of the grade, and I nearly fell over. And again, there's no witchcraft, there's nothing. This was literally done as is, with a little film, and the depth. A few people have said, have you turned around and cleaned up the highlights on the car? No, there's no clean. The only thing we've done is remove some mud spatters and things like that. So there's nothing else outside of that. So, going through that, you can say, the dynamic range is there. The details in the blacks and the riverbed are all there. The car, the only thing was we did retouch the track a little bit because Jaguar have a bit of a thing that it needs to look like it's on a semi-road, not off-road. Don't ask me, but anyway, that's part of it. And as you can see, it's a flat light, and we shot way into the evening. And one of the things which really did help here was the autofocus tracking. Now, this shot didn't make it, but we actually did pop on the 604 at one stage, and you've seen the video, I think, of this.
Yeah.
And you can select an area, and if you watch the behind the scenes, we selected the car headlight, and that car's traveling quite fast on the 604 wide open, and it tracked with us. And the look on the poor focus puller's face was quite exciting. I think he thought, time's getting closer. So yeah, that was a very interesting thing. Then the final thing, and this is where stuff really started to go sort of slightly astray. This is the last shot, which is again the green screen stuff at the very end. And look, the gag, and it's a very subtle gag in the ad, is that the car pulls up in front of a grey screen because we don't need all this beautiful background. It's the car that's the hero. And it's a very subtle thing to do, and it worked well. But there was a debate on whether it should have been a green screen, whether people had got it, or whether it should be a colour. So we decided to shoot against green screen. Anyway, the green screen turns up, and it's way too small. And we've turned around to the gaffer and said, well, where's the other? Oh, that's all I brought. It's like, well, where's your truck? I didn't bring a truck. I just brought one green screen. It's like, what? Oh, this is fantastic. There was supposed to be a mountain behind, which is, I'm saying to my DP, well, normally there's a mountain back there, but we're in thick cloud. You know, and also as well, we've got this car. So this is what we actually shot on the day, which I'm thinking, oh, you know, we're done for here. We are going to be going back again another day. I've got to call the client and get extra budget. And this is also the shots that I thought we would use the 700 for, to be honest with you. But we had them shooting side by side, and we actually ended up using everything's from the 200, except for the one shot, which is a close up of her. And it was only because it was a nice reaction. Anyway, we then went back the following day and shot would you believe, glorious sunshine. The weather forecast was around the wrong way. We went back the following day, and the mountain was there in all its glory. So we shot a plate, and in post we extended the green screen and made it grey, so it all worked. Graded it and dropped in the mountain, and this was the finished result. Now, not only did that mean we didn't have to go back and shoot, it looks pretty stunning. Also, as well, we have taken conditions. We have taken a completely in a flat image in cloud, once the light's virtually gone down, to an image that's in full sunlight behind, and they've all matched together and joined together. And that, for me, speaks volume on what we could do with the camera. And, you know, it saved it. So, you know, I firmly believe certain cameras we would have had to have gone back and reshot. There's no way we could have done what we did that day. So, you know, you could say, yes, the camera might be a little bit more expensive, it might be this, but that's a $40,000 save, really. Yeah, for sure. So that was kind of everything we went through. To be honest with you, we did the post back here in London, Gramercy Park Studios. Just so you know, what we did is at that time we couldn't. So we graded in Baselight, but we couldn't view the raw files. So what we did was we used Resolve 14 to create 16-bit DPX files, so we could grade in Baselight. But in terms of support, Resolve 14 runs it. Final Cut Pro has a plugin. Avid has a plugin to look at all the raw. Premiere, I believe, is on its way, so it's not too far off. That I can't say. And you know, so it does work across all of that. So that's pretty much going through the commercial and what we went through. Normally at this stage I re-show the commercial so you can kind of get a feel. But look, please re-watch it and watch the behind the scenes too, because you will then see everything I'm talking about.
Yeah, you can piece it all together, can't you?
Everything starts to make a little bit of sense. So I mean, I think it'd be sort of good to, if people have got questions, maybe.
If anyone wants to say text in a question, you use the question box on your screen. Just give us some questions and we can answer them.
So it's always a hard time trying to draw in the questions now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if not, we can. I mean, there's just something that I'd be interested in about in terms of whether you're using HDR or not. So maybe we can put the other poll question up. James gets a mention, so therefore his fee goes up. And it'd be interesting to see exactly whether you are using HDR or whether you're thinking about it or you're not convinced. It seems to be that everyone's convinced, which is what I would have suspected.
Oh, definitely, you've got to be convinced. It is.
Yeah.
I think everybody should be covering in HDR now for longevity.
Yes.
Yeah, even if you're not finishing, if you're not exposing HDR, shooting HDR,
Yeah.
HDR color space, and take it down to 709 for whatever you need. But be ready, because there'll be nothing worse than seeing your stuff in 5 years and it doesn't look any good when it's on an HDR monitor.
That's going to be. All right. Well, thanks for that. We'll close the questionnaire in a second. Yeah. So we've got some good results.
Oh,
Most
excellent.
people.
Good questions.
And a flurry of questions, which is fantastic. Do you want to answer the first one from Peter?
So what's the exposure workflow for HDR? What I said sort of at the beginning, Peter, I mean, okay, you've got to learn to read the waveform well, but you make sure you hold the highlights. You obviously then have to make a decision on where you chop the highlights if you want to hold something in the blacks. But I mean, what I've found is that with this camera, you sit down a little bit. So whereas most people might sit in the middle of a waveform, I tend to sit it slightly down a little bit because you want to hold those highlights. But if you clip a highlight in HDR, it just looks terrible because there's no roll off, there's no nothing. So yes, you make a decision. So if you're looking into the sun or something like that, yeah, you know, obviously then you've got to make that decision. But if it's holding in the bottom end of the waveform in the blacks, well, you're going to be able to pull it out.
Yeah.
You know, and you've seen that now with the going to the log 2. Yeah, it'll easily do it. So yeah, so that's really the only difference. I mean, I think people tend to sit up too high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason that you didn't use the C300?
Yes. Look, I mean, I've shot with the C300. I'm a firm lover of RAW. I mean, I think 300 does a fantastic image, but it's still a compressed. You know, it's an XFAVC, so it's you know, it's not a RAW file.
No.
You know what we've done with 300. Yes, you know, it looks great, and we, you know, it's, as I say, it's won an award for cinematography with it, but there's no way I would be able to push and pull it in the grade as much as we could do with the 200. The raw files just give you so much more latitude. Yes, you can shoot with the 300 and grab the raw files, because I have grabbed the raw files, but it's an external recorder, so you're suddenly adding all that stuff to it. And this, the beauty of this is a compact. Everything's internal. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Were any EF lenses using?
No, not on this. We, as I say, we did have them, but we stuck with cinema primes all the way through. I have used the EF quite a bit on the 300s, and since I've played around with the EF on the 200, and they do look beautiful. Really, the only real reason we're sticking, I mean, I still think, to be honest with you, that the actual image resolution between the two, you don't see a massive difference. It's more about, you know, when you vary focus, you know, and with images, you know, if you've got people in there, you can't have those changes going on.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this seems to come from the heart from David. He says, "Do you think the days of focus pullers are numbered?"
No, I don't think so at all. I think what it will be is that there just be different ways and maybe a different tool set.
Yeah.
So we've been playing around. I mean, the touch screen on the 200 for focus is quite amazing, and being able to tap between the two. I tried a prototype of something recently where it picked up a few people and it dragged across. But at the end of the day, you're still going to need a human brain I think, to really judge where you want to focus on an image. I've seen a couple of places working on facial recognition where it could store people's faces. So yes, there are going to be some very interesting stuff. I think where the difference is on a fast-moving object or something like that, then yes, 604 wide open, you know, then it's fantastic. But I think there'll always be a place, you know, for a focus puller.
How did you find working with the C200 versus the C300 Mark II?
To be honest with you, in the actual use and working with them, they're very, very similar. But I like the fact that the 200 is just a little bit smaller. Again, with both of them, with the 200, obviously we use the viewfinder off the 700. And actually, that's another point I didn't quite bring up. But by having that EVF that can go across from a 300, 200, and a 700. this is something I think that's really important now, is you're getting a good visual guide across 3 cameras to use as a reference. So you know what that one viewfinder looks like, and you're using it on 3 different cameras. There's nothing worse than we've had 2 different cameras with different types of viewfinders on set, and you're going, oh, you got no reference point.
Yeah.
So no, in terms of use, they're pretty much, not really too much difference. No.
Difference. Okay.
No.
Peter's asking where the location is.
Okay, so Queenstown, New Zealand, probably, if you get a chance to go, probably one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Looks fabulous, yeah.
So the lake, that lake where you saw the Jaguar driving along, is actually the one from Lord of the Rings. Yeah, so that's where we were, and it was quite an honour to shoot there.
A different budget you had as opposed to Peter when you took Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah. We had a few of his crew, which is quite interesting.
Really?
But actually, at that time, they were just finishing shooting Mission Impossible there. So
right.
Tom Cruise was in there, and we saw him flying to location by chopper. He flies himself every morning by chopper. So he went over. I went over the top of us every morning on his way to set.
Doesn't everyone?
Yeah, but amazing place to shoot. In the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Fabulous. What is the native ISO?
So native ISO is 800. In terms of noise, look, anything where you're seeing down into the bottom end of 15 stops of darkness, you're going to pull up a little bit of noise. You have to decide where you want to make the clip off. We ran no noise reduction on this, so what you're looking at is what was there. The first time when we first initially looked at it, the detail it was holding right in the very bottom end did have a little bit of noise in it. And all we did was we just decided not to show down to that bottom end in the stag stuff. And I think, when you look through it, there's not really any noise in it. Maybe nothing more than you'd expect to sit down in the bottom end of those shadows.
Sure.
But, once you get down into that area, there's always going to be a bit of dirt. But I didn't want to run noise reduction in grading because I wanted to show what the camera had actually done. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's the last question, unless anyone's got anything else. We'll hang around for a few minutes more. If not, we'll wrap it up. Certainly, I've got an awful lot out of that, Brett. That was
I really
fantastic.
enjoyed it.
It was really, really good, insightful. Lots of questions, I think, and it's something that thank you for coming along.
Oh no, I've enjoyed it. No, thank you very much. And please, everybody watch the commercials back again afterwards, because it all makes a lot more sense then.
Yes, altogether, exactly. Yes, so you can, as I say, we will send you a link. So, in terms of the webinar, so you can look at that and then look at the commercial before and afterwards, and get it all in detail. And
out of interest, I know a couple of people have asked me this. The BTS was shot in a C700.
Right.
Yes, by a good friend of mine who's a 60 Minutes cameraman, which is a documentary news show. Right. He shoots everything on C700. He has it set up a bit like a Betacam.
Right.
Yeah, and we shot next FAVC on that, and I think it looks stunning, the BTS.
Right.
Yeah, so brilliant. Interesting camera choice for that.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Very, very good. Okay.
Cool. Lovely.
Thanks very much, everyone. I say thanks for listening and joining in. Hope you enjoyed it, and bye for now.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.